Yeah, hi, good evening to all of you. And thanks, Amit, for inviting me here. I'm going to be speaking about the need for Indian companies in particular to go beyond Jugaad and to create a systematic innovation capability. Why do I believe this is the case? If you look at the ratings of innovation in India, if you look at any of the surveys that have been done or any of the studies that have been conducted, you will see that India in general figures quite badly on most of these innovation indices. In fact, in the Global Innovation Index from INSEAD and WIPO, India's rank has actually slipped 2 places this year from 64 to 66. And irrespective of what metrics these innovation studies consider, India's ranking is not terribly good. So the question which keeps coming to my mind is, we seem to have a set of extremely creative people. Indians do extremely well in other parts of the world when it comes to innovation. But when it comes to India, we often find that innovation is not really quite the way we want to see it. Basically, the question I'm asking is, why does India fail to do well on innovation in spite of having creative people? I tried to answer this question in my previous book, which was titled From Jugaad to Systematic Innovation, The Challenge for India. And there are a few things I noted there. One thing I noted is that we seem to have a lot of barriers that come from Indian society. We seem to have, for example, a preference for brain work over getting your hands dirty. In organizations, we tend to emphasize going up a hierarchy, which sort of takes you away from doing very focused technical work. We also have a low tolerance for failure. So many of these things come in the way of India doing innovation. And I'm having the same problem which some of the earlier speakers had. Let me see if I can control this effectively. Okay, so one of the things I tried to do was figure out, apart from these societal barriers, what are really the challenges that India faces when it comes to innovation? And my diagnosis at the kind of national level was that if you look at India's innovation performance in the last couple of decades, the incentive to innovate has certainly improved. So if Indian firms innovate, there's a much greater demand for innovative products and services. But two areas where India still has a long way to go is in terms of inputs and is in terms of capacity to innovate. Now the inputs to innovation again are sort of getting addressed because we have more funding from the government, we have more funding from venture capitalists. So a lot of that is beginning to change. But this whole question of how do you create capacity to innovate, that's something which is much more a challenge at the firm level. So how do you create capacity to innovate is the question. And there's a serious issue because our traditional method of innovation has tended to be much more based on creative improvisation. Now, I'm not belittling creative improvisation. I think it's an important starting point for any kind of innovation activity. But when you have an innovation system which is based largely on individual ingenuity or on just trying to find very quick and dirty solutions, sometimes that's not very scalable. Sometimes that's also not very robust, as one of the earlier questioners was asking. So you need to move a little away from this. You need to build other innovation capabilities on top of that. And the reason I think that's particularly important in the Indian context is Indian challenges are a bit different from the challenges that Navi Raju described to you some time ago. When he talked, for example, about multinationals, he talked about how they are finding that they're very slow and deliberate. They need to be much more entrepreneurial, much more flexible in order to innovate. They've got too embedded in the traditional R&D, investment-oriented innovation culture. But if you look at Indian firms, we have a completely different problem. We are kind of too improvisational and ad hoc. We are not really making the kind of long-term investments which are required to do the kind of impactful innovation which might really make a difference. So my argument has been that for Indian firms, the challenge is not to embrace Jugaad, because Jugaad is what we already have. But for Indian firms, the challenge is how do you embrace systematic innovation. And that's an area on which we did some work recently. With Vinay Dabolkar, we wrote a book a few months ago called 8 Steps to Innovation, Going from Jugaad to Excellence. And there we outlined an 8-step process that Indian firms could follow to build an innovation culture. And what I'm going to do in the rest of my presentation today is I'm going to describe to you what are those 8 steps that we believe are important for Indian firms if they want to build a strong innovation capability. How did we go about building or finding these 8 steps? We went about finding these 8 steps by understanding what are the challenges that Indian companies face in innovation. And when we spoke to them, we found that they had 3 challenges. The first challenge they described was they don't have a steady flow of ideas in the organization. In other words, they didn't have a good idea pipeline. There was sporadic creation of ideas, but there was not a sustained flow of ideas. The second problem that some companies told us was, ideation is not the problem. In fact, we have a lot of brainstorming sessions and people come up with ideas. But a year later when we look back at those ideas, we don't know what happened to them. Somehow they got stuck, they got lost, they weren't acted upon. So we said the second problem is, how do you create idea velocity? How do you make sure that the ideas go forward? A third set of companies told us it's not ideation that's a problem, and we know how to take ideas forward, but the real problem for us is how do we get impact from the ideas? We are not able to see business impact coming from all the innovation we do. So we call the third problem a batting average problem. How do you create impact from innovation? So we try to address this whole challenge or these 3 challenges by looking at 8 steps. The first important step we believe to building this kind of an innovation capability is to lay the foundation. And for us, one firm which epitomizes how you can build the foundation for India is Titan. In fact, we call Titan the 3M of India because Titan is one company which has been able to bring in innovation into multiple dimensions of its activities, whether it be marketing, branding, product design, process improvement, you name it, Titan has been able to bring innovation into these different dimensions. And what did Titan do to make this happen? One of the things they did very successfully is create a lot of very interesting innovation campaigns. Every year, Titan launches an innovation campaign on a different theme, reflecting what are the current priorities of the company. For example, in 2008, they launched a theme called Simplify and Automate, reflecting the fact that they felt their manufacturing processes were becoming very complex, productivity was falling, and there was a need to make these processes not only simple, but also to be able to automate them to improve productivity. So having done this, during that year, people across the manufacturing organization came up with several new ideas on how to automate processes. One of the results of this was something called a diamond bagging machine, which is a patented robot which allows the assembly of all the diamonds for a particular piece of jewelry to be done in a machine-driven way rather than in a human-driven way. So this improves productivity, and this was the first time this was done anywhere in the world. The second thing that we found was that in laying a foundation, companies like Titan focused a lot on training and development. Why did they focus on training and development? Because while people have creative skills, there is often a challenge in how do you apply those creative skills in the workplace. They might be more comfortable applying their creativity in cooking or in music or in art, but how do you make sure that people can use their creative skills in the workplace? Remember, I told you earlier that I think Indians are very creative, but we don't know how to direct that creativity to solving business problems. So one thing Titan has been doing, which has been very effective, is trying to run training programs to help their employees learn how to apply creative thinking in business problem solving. And some of the areas they focus on are design thinking, systems thinking, and they have a pretty audacious goal. They want everybody in Titan to be an innovator by the year 2015, and that's what they are moving towards now in their whole effort at training. The second important step in the whole process of innovation is creating what we call a challenge book. What is a challenge book? Challenge book is essentially saying, what are the problems that we really need to solve? Because again, if you want innovation to have impact, if you want innovation to be effective, it's much better to work on challenges that are likely to result in business success. And our research showed that the most effective challenges to focus on, or the most important challenges to focus on, are those which cover 3 different dimensions. They reflect the pain of users or customers, They represent a current wave in technology and demographics and consumer behavior. And they also address some waste, some resources which are not being put to good use. Let me give you an example of this. If you look at Bajaj's Pulsar, one of the most successful motorbikes launched in India, it addressed these three very effectively. What did they do? The Pulsar addressed an important pain point. There was a new generation of riders who wanted more than transportation. They wanted power and style in a bike. At the same time, they wanted a bike that didn't cost a bomb, so it had to be reasonably priced but offered these attributes. There was a clear wave which happened in the early 2000s when Bajaj launched this bike. There were young male employees, particularly in IT services and other industries, with high disposable income. They couldn't afford to buy a Harley Davidson, but they could afford to buy a more powerful and stylish bike. And what is the waste that Bajaj addressed? Most powerful bikes just consume too much fuel, so their operating cost is just too high. So people wanted a bike that provided power and style, but didn't consume a whole lot of fuel. And that's where Bajaj did an important technological innovation. They worked on something called digital twin spark ignition technology, which enabled them to enhance the power of the bike, but without increasing the fuel consumption too much. So it's addressing pain, wave, and waste, which helped Bajaj address the right kind of challenge, which was successful in the marketplace. The third important foundational element of innovation for Indian companies, in our view, is building participation. There used to be historically a view that innovation is for mavericks, it's only for geniuses. But in the contemporary world where people are using crowdsourcing and other participative techniques, that whole notion of innovation has changed. Today's notion of innovation is you get all your employees or as many employees as possible involved in the innovation process. How do you do that? You do several things. You try to create credible role models. You try to facilitate employees creating groups of people who informally meet to share ideas, or what we call communities of practice. Mindtree in Bangalore is a company which has more than 50 communities of practice and has been doing this very effectively. You train people in the company to be innovation catalysts. These are people in the company who are not necessarily doing innovation themselves, but they're helping others in the company be innovative. So if they have a barrier or if they face an obstacle to innovation, the innovation catalysts help them overcome that barrier. And you use rewards and recognition to get more and more people in the innovation process. Maruti has done that extremely well right from the few years after it was started here in Gurgaon. And more employees in Maruti have got involved in the innovation process. The next important step is to start looking at the idea velocity challenge. So the next 3 steps are devoted to the whole question of how do you improve idea velocity. The core idea here is really experimentation. Experimentation is what allows you to find out whether ideas are valuable or not. Unfortunately, in India, we often think that innovation equals ideation. But innovation is not just ideation. All ideas don't necessarily have value. Some ideas are good, some are not, but the way you find out is by testing them. So what we believe the important thing to do here is to be able to experiment with low cost at high speed, to be able to complete both the loops from idea to demo and demo to impact as quickly as possible, to test all the different assumptions which go into the innovation process. A good model for this is actually Facebook. If you look at the speed at which Facebook went through these loops, you can see how effective you can be in experimenting. And to do this, you also have to create a strong climate for experimentation. Creating a climate for experimentation allows people to have the confidence that they can fail without getting penalized in the company. The company also provides resources to allow people to experiment quickly. And some companies like in India, like Marico, like Mahindra, like Galaxy Surfactants, a company which works very closely with shampoo and detergent manufacturers. These are some of the companies which have tried to create that culture of quick experimentation, which allows them to test out their ideas and move forward. You might remember this scene from the movie 3 Idiots. In 3 Idiots, there was this situation where the student couldn't complete his project. He went to virus the principal, and the principal told him, no, you failed because you haven't been able to complete the project on time. That, according to us, is a major fallacy in the whole experimentation thing. The whole idea of experimentation is to test assumptions, is to learn, not to prove success or failure. And that's a big mistake which virus made in this situation. Companies need to avoid that by creating a positive environment for people to try out new ideas and to be able to test their ideas. Now, it's not enough if you test your ideas. Often, after you have proved the concept, the thing can get stuck once again. This time, it gets stuck for a different reason. Many of you might know that the Konkan Railway as an idea is a 100-year-old idea. It was first suggested during the British time. But it could never be constructed during the British time because of engineering problems, resource problems, and so on. Even after we became independent, we didn't take that project forward. It actually had to wait till George Fernandez in this picture became the railway minister. And one of the first things he did after becoming railway minister was to call people in the railway board and say, how do we take the Konkan Railway forward? He became the champion for that idea. So he got the resources, he convinced the prime minister, he got the planning commission on board. And Indian innovation in Indian organizations needs to be able to find such champions to be able to take innovation forward. Just like we are talking a lot about experimentation on products and other ideas, iteration on the business model is an equally important part of taking ideas forward. And the willingness to iterate on ideas is another important characteristic we need to build in Indian organizations. Just to give you an example from Shadi.com, Anupam Mittal, the guy who founded Shadi.com, he first thought that a matrimonial website would ideally be addressed at people who wanted to get married, young men and women. He would be able to reach them through the internet, he would be able to communicate with them through the internet, and he would be able to get them to take subscriptions. But having lived outside India for a long time, he had forgotten Indian reality. Indian reality is that it's not the kids who are really so keen on the marriage, it's actually the parents who are looking to get their kids married. So the customer is really the parents. At that time, the parents couldn't be reached through the internet because many of them were not on the net. So you had to reach them through normal communication channels. And the parents were much more savvy. They were not going to pay a subscription upfront until they saw some proposals that made sense to them. So the whole business model of Shadi.com had to change before Shadi.com could become successful. This is the kind of iteration on business models that companies need to adopt to be able to take their ideas forward and to make sure that innovation reaches the next stage. The last two steps are focused on increasing the batting average, increasing business impact. And there are two steps we believe that are very important for Indian organizations to incorporate into their innovation processes. The first one is what we call building an innovation sandbox. This is an idea which was first proposed by C.K. Prahalad many years ago. What is the sandbox idea? It's very simple. It says, have very clearly defined boundaries for what is it that your innovation needs to achieve, and then do intense experimentation within those boundaries. The boundaries reflect whatever you have already defined in terms of your product based on pain, wave, and waste, and market needs, and so on. The advantage of doing this is you focus all your efforts in coming up with a solution that meets the needs of the market without feature creep and without other kind of additional costs which might make your product uncompetitive. The second important thing here is to be able to use platforms. Platforms help you apply your thinking across multiple domains. They de-risk your innovation because they allow you to get value back from addressing different product markets or different customer groups. Infosys has done this quite cleverly with their Infosys 3.0 program. They identified several themes based on a lot of research they did with about 150 companies. They now have a whole series of platforms which can do multiple functions for these applications. And of course, they have a whole lot of offerings which ride on top of that, which can be customized for different customers. So this is the kind of thinking which helps you take your innovation and apply it in multiple contexts. The last step as far as increasing your batting average and making sure that you get better results is to embrace open innovation. Open innovation, again, is something that companies the world over have been doing, but Indian companies need to do this very intelligently. They need to mix and match ideas from outside with their own strengths. Eureka Forbes is a company that does that very well, because Eureka Forbes has a very strong presence in the water purification market in India, and therefore they're a natural target for people all over the world who have new water purification technologies. Eureka Forbes has used that advantage to take many of these technologies to the market, and one good example is this Kitanu magnet technology which they started using a couple of years ago. The last step in our 8-step journey is creating a margin of safety. This is all about how do you de-risk the innovation process. Now, there are many techniques here, and I don't have time to share all of those with you. So let me just close with one last technique, which is conducting pre-mortems. Pre-mortems are something that help you anticipate what are the problems and challenges that may come up in the innovation process. Your group gets together, imagines that the product or innovation has failed, and tries to brainstorm and identify what could have gone wrong. And all of these become possible failure modes for you to address. This is not a completely new idea, but this is one of the important ways in which Indian companies as well as others can de-risk. And just to give you a very dramatic example, you could just imagine what kind of savings Boeing would have been able to achieve, both in terms of reputation and money, had they just done a better pre-mortem of the Dreamliner batteries instead of facing all the embarrassment they've had to face in recent months. So this is essentially the 8-step process which we believe will help companies build a systematic innovation capability on top of their inherent advantages of doing things with a lot of improvisation and low cost. A combination of these two, in our view, will help Indian companies take the best of their traditional advantages as well as be more competitive in the global environment. Thank you.